Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Lawcast. Today, Cewsh and I are going to be talking about TNA Lockdown 2008. You got to be fired up to finally be talking about TNA, aren't you?
Oh my God, this is my stuff right here. I was been a TNA adopter since day one. TNA is the blood that runs through my veins, even though I've tried to quit it more times than I can possibly count. So it was all coming home to roost right here, and I'm ready to cross the line.
Yeah, so I'm kind of on the exact opposite. Never really watched TNA beyond, peeking in at a few points when they were kind of at their most popular and always, deciding it wasn't really worth my time. And those peaks of popularity was the show, which is Lockdown 2008. What are your memories of this show?
The biggest thing that I remember is that it was just kind of like a moment in time in the wrestling industry. There was a moment where generally it seemed as a TNA fan like the entire wrestling world had its eyes on TNA. WWE had really kind of fallen off. Nothing really interesting had been going on for almost like a year up until this point, and it really felt like TNA had all this momentum and all this intrigue, and they had a match that people genuinely wanted to see between Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle. And then you look at the buys now, and it's a shitty WrestleMania crowd, the total amount of people who actually watch the show. But still, it felt like a moment.
Was the biggest business any pay-per-view they ever had did. It did 55,000 buys, which, like you said, would be a weak crowd for a WrestleMania, but more buys than they had ever done. And what drew people in was this match between Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle. But this was not the first time those two had faced off. It was, I believe, the fifth time on pay-per-view they'd had a match at this point.
This is the fourth one officially. They did one at Genesis, one at Final Resolution, and then one in the middle of 2007. But that one doesn't really count. It's not even really counted as like part of their actual feud. So it's really, in spirit, it's the third. It's the rubber match.
Yeah. But what they did differently this time was there was no kind of angles or storyline leading up to this. It was just Samoa Joe is going to fight Kurt Angle, and it's for the TNA title. And they really treated it like it was a boxing match or a mixed martial arts fight. And they did kind of training packages and talked about the strategy each guy was going to have. And it's really kind of a revolutionary approach. This was the Iron Man match between Michaels and Hart, where they kind of did the 24/7 style build-up with the training packages back in 1996.
And it's so interesting that they're kind of blending MMA and wrestling together in this and making that part of a thing, because both of these guys are as credible as you can possibly find. And they definitively put them with like MMA trainers, like they're getting ready for a war. This is going to be the war to end all wars between the two most credible wrestlers in the entire industry. And they've never, not TNA, not really WWE, like nobody ever revisits this ever again. It's insane. It's a smashing success. They do it in such a positive way that you would think this would be their business model going forward, or at least how they present Joe. It's forgotten after this show, despite all the brilliance of the build-up.
Like, on a smaller scale, it's like if after WrestleMania 14, Vince had been like, oh, well, this Attitude Era thing, it's okay, but let's try something entirely different.
Yes.
Our biggest pay-per-view ever. Like,
it's so weird. And we'll probably get into exactly what winds up happening with Samoa Joe after this and how they drop the ball. But this is just one of the ways in which they drop that ball. But yeah, the presentation of this is genius. They bring in Frank Trigg, who isn't like a big name MMA guy, but he winds up being so incredibly good at like doing the commentary for this that they keep him on for like 6 more months just to do commentary, because he's amazing at breaking this down and making it feel real. Like a real conflict, like there are real stakes. It's amazing.
Yeah, I was shocked by how good his commentary is. Not only is he great at calling like the kind of mixed martial arts aspects of the fight, but then when they start kind of just doing pro wrestling, it's, he's great at that too. He was the best announcer in the booth on this night.
Yeah, so just remember that when they wind up replacing Don West with not Frank Trigg, but Taz.
Yeah. So this is Lockdown. How many times had they done this all cage pay-per-view format at this point?
I think it officially started like this in 2005. I might be wrong about that, but I definitely remember that year that they did do it this way. So it's a couple of years now. It's pretty well entrenched. And as you can see with the show, by this point, they're trying desperately to find ways to keep the matches fresh just because they're all in cages and they all look the same.
They do manage to differentiate some of the matches, but I would say almost all of these matches, the cage was kind of just there. Very few of them, I feel like, really utilize the cage very much beyond the Lethal Lockdown match.
I've always wondered if they did it this way, not so much creatively, but to save money. Like, we can't afford to put up and take down this cage, and we can't suspend it above the ring in the tiny-ass places where we're running, so fuck it. Just keep it up the whole show.
Did they really ever do cage matches outside of Lockdown? Because it does sort of seem like if you're going to do a pay-per-view of all cage matches, that kind of has to be it for the year.
Yeah, it basically is. In this era, no, they didn't. In the four-sided ring era, they kind of did. But that's because they basically erased TNA's history to do that era, so it's a whole different deal.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to do to kind of set the stage for the show?
Well, to set the stage for the show, you need to remember that in advance, they knew this was going to be a gigantic show for them. They knew this was going to be their shot. So everything they're presenting on this show is what they think is the best of the best that they have. They're putting all of their biggest stars. The Lethal Lockdown match from this year is probably the biggest and maybe only good one. We'll get to that later. But as we go through the show, I just want you to understand that this is the best foot that TNA has to put forward. And that's going to be embarrassing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, the main event's amazing. The rest of this card is, I'd say, pretty forgettable, and a lot of it is just kind of silly. It's TNA Lockdown. It's the 6-side. Every match is a 6-way match for some reason.
Yeah, every match has a bizarre gimmick. Every match involves at least one thing that's at least low-level offensive, either just to a regular human being or to a wrestling fan. It's TNA, man. This is TNA at its core.
Because just being a steel cage is definitely not enough.
Oh, of course not. I mean, steel cage match, how is that going to blow off a feud? You got to get a guy's wife in there.
Okay, so getting into the show, we open. I thought this was actually kind of a cool opening. Mike Tenay is kind of in the cage. The arena's empty. The lights are on, and he kind of does a mock the main event. The winner is going to be the world champion. Joe's put his career on the line. But I thought this was kind of a cool opening to the show.
Oh, yeah, it absolutely was. And they go into the crowd a bunch because this is one of the only really big crowds that TNA ever draws. And that's the other reason it felt like a big deal is they're not in the Impact Zone. They're in Boston. They're actually out somewhere. And they drew a big crowd and they feel really great about it. And so Borash is out in the crowd. Don West is out in the crowd. And then they play. One thing TNA was legendary for is these hype videos they play before the show with the gravelly voiced announcer talking about the legendary clashes of TNA. Oh my God.
Best line. So the cage is talking to us in this package. He says, "Here I stand, hard and erect."
Here I stand, hard and erect.
I assume somebody was in on the joke when they wrote that. At least I hope they were.
I hope Kevin Nash wrote that shit in the back. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, we'll get into him later, but I think this is the most no fucks giving Kevin Nash we ever saw, and that's saying something.
Oh yeah, big time. That's him in TNA. The most fucks he gives during his entire TNA run is where they put him with the X Division guys and say, come up with new gimmicks on the spot for all of the X Division. That's a thing that TNA did.
Yeah. So, like you said, I did really like the interview and the fans, and I like the fan. I mean, I guess they probably kind of talked to him first, but the fans all kind of play along and they take it seriously. And yeah, a ton of energy, great crowd for this show. Again, I think the biggest they ever drew in a really energetic one.
Oh yeah, like this is a gigantic success, and you can feel it from the word go. I mean, the fans are in; they never die out for the entirety of the show. Like they are hot, and that just kind of gives you an idea of like how hot this show actually was. TNA, like genuinely, if they went into Boston today, I'm not sure they would draw 200 people. They draw 5,500 people who give a shit into this place. That's incredible. And if you look at them like an indie promotion, which is basically all they ever were, like this is a gigantic smashing success.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the opening match is an X Division Escape match. It's Jay Lethal versus Consequences Creed versus Curryman versus Matt Devine versus Shark Boy versus Sanjay Dutt. So Jay Lethal, I believe, is the defending champion?
Yes, Black Machismo Jay Lethal is the defending champion.
Yeah, so we have Jay Lethal doing Randy Savage, and we have Shark Boy doing Steve Austin. So we've got two parody gimmicks in this match.
And if you think those are the only parody gimmicks you're going to see on this show, you are wrong. That was just a huge thing in TNA for a minute. I honestly don't have any way to explain to you why they just started doing other people's shtick, but this show is just full of it for some reason.
Well, I mean, as I remember, Lethal was really, really good at doing Randy Savage.
Oh, he was amazing. He was great at any impression, too. Like, his best segment of his career was when he did Ric Flair to Ric Flair.
Yeah, I remember that. And I thought Shark Boy did a decent Steve Austin, too.
Shill, yeah, he did.
So the rest of these gimmicks, we got Consequence, very young Xavier Woods. He's like 20 year. He's a kid.
Oh yeah, he's a baby. He was originally called in to actually take the bumps in Pac-Man Jones's matches.
Because Pac-Man's contract stipulated he couldn't actually
take a bump. That is another thing TNA did.
Matt Devine is just some guy as far as I know.
He was originally kind of an auxiliary member of Team Canada. He's like one of Scott D'Amore's guys. He's gonna kind of float around and just be a sidekick to everybody for ages, whether it be Alex Shelley. I think at this point he's with Team 3D and he's just kind of their X Division stooge. And they would go on to like feud with the whole X Division, and he would kind of be like the X Division traitor.
Yeah. Sanjay Dutt, the storyline is that he's Jay Lethal's buddy, so he's watching Lethal's back in this match.
And pretty soon after this, he's going to start trying to bang Jay Lethal's girlfriend as they do like a weird, creepy version of the Mega Powers.
Yeah. And Curryman is Christopher Daniels.
Yep. This was originally his gimmick in Japan, and he lost. This is one of the times where he lost the Feast or Fired and got fired.
Okay.
And so they brought him back.
It's Charlie Brown from Out of Town.
Exactly.
Which is one of my favorite like carny old wrestling storylines that they never do anymore.
Just like a guy leaves and he comes back under a mask, and it's totally not the same, guys.
Yeah, Mr. Rider. I guess the last time the WWE did this was Miz, but that only lasted a week when he came back as like the Canada Kid or something, and he won his job back under a mask.
What about Juan Cena?
I don't remember that.
It was when the Nexus got him fired, and then he showed up on house shows in a luchador mask as Juan Cena.
Oh, that's brilliant! That's the epitome of the gimmick. Do people know that Christopher Daniels is Curryman?
I mean, I certainly did at the time. I would imagine that most of their audience probably does, because they're the kind of people who genuinely would know that kind of thing. It's not like they're keeping it a secret, really. I mean, he looks like Christopher Daniels.
Yeah. So the rules of this match, it's pinfall or submission until it's down to two people, and then you win by escaping the cage, either over the top rope or through the door. And for some reason, they tag in and out, even though it's a cage match and there's no disqualifications.
Actually, it's not quite what the rules are. The rules are technically that the last two, it's that, but that everybody before that, you only eliminate them by handcuffing them to the ring, which is why they're doing that so much?
Huh? No, that's a later match. That's the tag match.
Oh crap! I'm thinking about totally the wrong match. Yeah, you're right. My bad. Sorry about that.
This is Escape. Yeah, that's the cuffed in the cage match that Jen will get to later.
This whole show's the same.
So I don't feel like recapping this. Guys get eliminated. Like, we come down to versus Lethal. Divine tapes Lethal to the rope with wrist tape. And then Dutt hands Jay Lethal a knife. First time I've ever seen a knife used in a wrestling match. And Lethal cuts himself free and runs out the door to retain the title. It wasn't a bad match. It's just like the most typical X Division match I've ever seen. Like, they did this match at this show every year, right?
Yeah. And it was so funny because, honestly, watching the X Division now, and it's been a long time since I saw the X Division style, it seems so fresh and to pop off the screen, and it's like, oh my God, they're doing all this stuff. But when I used to watch it week to week, it'd just be like, every single one of these matches is exactly the same. They all do the same fucking spots. They all do the same shit. It's just going to last 5 minutes, be 40 flips, and we're done. And yet, it's the first thing everybody cares about when they first watch TNA, right? It's the first thing that you notice that makes you go, wow, what's this?
Yeah, it's car crash TV.
And yeah, I mean, they did their job well. I mean, there's never been a style that exactly matched this. I mean, it's car crash.
Yeah, it's partner to the show. They're always going to get the crowd going. Didn't take up a ton of time. It was a fun match.
Yep, there's really not much more to say about it.
Yeah, same match they do every year, but there was a reason they kept going back to it. So the next thing was Jeremy Borash interviewing Frank Trigg, and he kind of breaks down the mindset of Angle and Joe, what they're feeling on the brink of a big fight. Talked about how by this point he'd have always puked out of nervousness. He talks about how Angle's a big match competitor, that he's won world championships, that he's won an Olympic gold medal, but that Joe doesn't have the same big fight experience. And then he breaks down their strengths, says Joe probably has the advantage on the ground, but Angle is a better stand-up. But he has to have messed up his lines and gotten that backwards, because he can't be claiming Samoa Joe has a ground advantage against an Olympic gold medalist wrestler.
Yeah, maybe no one on Earth has a ground advantage over Kurt Angle.
No.
But I will say, just for his
Kurt
sake,
Angle, one of the greatest amateur wrestlers of all time.
Yeah. Doing commentary for something like this is such a minefield, right? You can't say anything that makes it seem like you're taking it too seriously, because the fans will shit on it like, dude, it's not real. We know it's not real. But you can't make it seem like you're too in on the joke like most MMA commentators do when they come to WWE, because it just doesn't feel right. Like, you're not honoring the product. So what he has to do is make it seem like this is a real fight between real competitors, but that he has to put over the stuff that actually he can make something of. Like, you can't be like, well, I think Kurt Angle's got a great knee hook he's going to go for. We can go look at his previous fights. There's no previous fights. You can't refer to professional wrestling matches and make that anything. So he's literally working from scratch, and he does an amazing job of making this sound legit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like we've said this, but yeah, I mean, he did a tremendous job on this show.
And he just looks exactly like Kurt Angle, and they wind up using that in storylines later.
Good, because that was the first thing I noticed when he started talking. I'm like, it looks like Kurt Angle's brother. Looks more like him than Kurt Angle's actual brother does.
That's true.
So the next match is the Queen of the Cage match. We've got Angelina Love, Velvet Sky, Salinas, Raka Khan, Tracy Brooks, Jacqueline, and Roxy Laveau. So this is a reverse cage match where you have to climb into the cage, and then the two in the cage have a match. How stupid is that?
Unbelievably stupid, especially since two of the women get in the cage within a minute and a half.
Well, it was good that they did, because the opening, them trying to brawl was terrible. The only person who could lay stuff in was Jacqueline, because she knows how to actually fight.
Well, it's important to note that this is soon after they had inducted the Knockouts division. Like, Kong's only the second champion ever. Like, this is not a long way in. And so they don't have a real division to build around it. They have some acts. I mean, they have Kong, they have Gale, they have ODB, they have Angelina Love, they have Velvet Sky. That's it. Everybody else in this match is a valet that can wrestle but doesn't. And so, like, this isn't a fair fight for, like, Tracy Brooks and Jacqueline and them. Like, they have no business being in this actual division, but they just need to pad it out. So thank God they didn't waste a bunch of time.
Yeah, so 30 seconds in, Angelina Love climbs in and Roxy makes it in. And then they have a decent 5-minute match that Roxy wins. I mean, the opening segment was kind of crappy, and there were some moments where people were just kind of standing around rather than trying to climb the cage and win. But the match that followed was fine, I thought.
Yeah, it was perfectly fine, pretty nondescript. It's worth mentioning that they kind of put Roxy over hard here, and a couple months later, they're going to shave her bald, and she'll be basically buried back into the indies within 6 months.
Yeah, not much long-term thinking here. This women's division was definitely a blown opportunity by TNA. This was something WWE wasn't doing at the time. They weren't presenting serious women's wrestling, so they could have signed all the best women's wrestlers in the world. And they do get several of them, but they never feature this the way they should, right?
No, absolutely not. It's actually interesting because it's similar to like the women's revolution that WWE just did. What they do is they hit immediately on a feud that everyone wants to see. Gail Kim versus Awesome Kong. They have 3 matches that blow everyone away. They're the talk of the wrestling industry. But they don't have anything after that. And 3 months is not enough time to build an entire division. So it just kind of slips out of their fingers. But as long as they have Kong, everything's still going great. But little by little, they drain away her credibility until she's just another person. And then the division never recovers after that. It never recovers from, oh God, I can't even remember the name of the girl who beats Kong. Oh,
well, don't
I think
ask
she was
me because...
Oh my God, that's going to bother me forever. I think she was Chantel Taylor on the indie scene. Never mind, keep going. But yeah, it never really recovers. And it's a shame because Gail Kim versus Awesome Kong was some of the best women's wrestling ever done in America.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a real shame that WWE screwed over Gail Kim so badly.
And Kong, for that matter.
Yeah, both of them, because I would love to see them in their current women's division.
Absolutely. They were ahead of their time. And it's a big shame, too, because Gail Kim is like a TNA Hall of Famer, and she's the only woman who's ever been credible. And this was the division that she worked for years to make this reality. Like, she and Scott D'Amore begged backstage for a women's division for years and years and years. And it just hasn't become what she dreamed of it, you know?
No. Too bad. So up next, we had a Samoa Joe promo, really good promo. Says he'll be damned if he lets Kurt Angle take away from him what he's devoted his life to. Just really strong intensity here.
I did always hate Joe's promos from this era because, like, once you've seen enough of them, you realize that every single thing is, I'm going to go in there tonight and I'm going to fight and I'm not going to let you do it. And then it's back down to calm, and then the yelling, and then back down to calm. Like, literally, like somebody off screen is being like, now start shouting, now start
Turn
shouting.
the volume up, back down.
Yeah.
So then we get a much worse Billy Gunn promo, although as far as his promo's not far from the worst I've ever seen. It's pre-taped. He's talking in front of a kid, but it felt like, the tiger wasn't really, because he was just kind of laying there.
Yeah. Billy Gunn cuts a promo on this show in front of a goddamn tiger. Like, that's where we are. And yeah, it looked like it could not be less interested in Billy Gunn being 1 inch from its face.
And then Road Dogg does a promo from, like, behind the fence at a playground. Because it's like a cage. Road Dogg's promo is predictably much better.
Yeah, I mean, Road Dogg's very good. But For a storyline about these two feuding after being tag team partners for so long, man, there was no heat on this storyline whatsoever. What a horrible way to do this.
Yeah, I did feel like there was a lot of hate because I think he's just very naturally unlikable, but this match was not terribly good. Pretty much Gunn just beat the shit out of him for a while. He hit the Famouser, Road Dogg kicked out, Road Dogg made a comeback. Gunn went for a Stinger Splash, and Road Dogg rolled him up for the pin. And then they shook hands, but Gunn turned on Road Dogg, and the announcers are, putting this over. What a shock! All they did was shake hands. Like, that was the most predictable turn I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Neither one of these guys. I mean, all of Road Dogg's best work has already happened by the time Billy Gunn shows up. Like, neither one of these guys. This run
struck me as like one of the worst things in wrestling history. The New Age Outlaws and TNA, Voodoo Kin Mafia, and like,
oh my god,
doing shoot promos on Triple H and Shawn Michaels, and then just terrible.
It's so funny to me that they thought that was going to get a rise out of somebody in WWE. I bet you they were laughing their asses off if they ever even heard about it.
Yeah, one, they may not have ever even heard about it, and two, if you were Triple H or Shawn Michaels, it's like when Shane Douglas cuts promos on Ric Flair. Why would Ric Flair care?
Exactly right. Oh my gosh, they said my name was Michael Hickenbottom. Well, that's my name.
Yeah, so run-of-the-mill match, not a really hot storyline. I don't think anybody, was particularly interested in the New Age Outlaws by this point.
No.
Then we get a Kurt Angle promo. He is incredibly intense here. He somehow doesn't blink for like 5 minutes of this promo. And he's just like, I need to beat Samoa Joe. He sounds like a serial killer.
And it's honestly, he's in probably the best shape I've ever seen a wrestler be in my entire life.
He's so cut here. He looks like they bill him at like 235, but I bet he was 15 here.
Yeah, like literally, like I have to tell you, he does. It's not in a steroids way. It's not in a super bulked up way. Like, he looks so fucking physically fit here that I think he could have walked into UFC like immediately after finishing his match. Like, that's how good he looks. It's insane. He just looks like
he's been running 10 miles a day and lifting weight.
Yeah, it's madness. That just adds to like the serial killer element of it. Like, oh my god, like Kurt clearly took this seriously.
Yeah, like he trained like this was a real fight, which is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, Joe just kind of looks like Joe, but even like
Joe slimmed down a little. Joe's probably down to 280.
Right. But like, it's really Kurt who's like taking this mega seriously. And he comes out in the new attire, and we can talk about all that later. But like, yeah, he's selling it hard. And like the one bit of sort of storyline, like pro wrestling carny nonsense that they're doing with this, is that he and Karen had their on-screen separation like the month before. And like, he separated from her so that she wouldn't be a distraction from his match.
That storyline, the bits I saw of everything with her and Angle and Jarrett made me super uncomfortable.
It is super uncomfortable, man. It never gets better.
Yeah, I integrating real things into wrestling, but I don't need to integrate somebody's real divorce and having like their wife stolen from them.
I'm pretty sure they bring the
right after Chris Benoit has killed his wife, who he stole from Kevin Sullivan.
Very good point. And yeah, I think at one point they bring the kids in and everything too. Like, it gets yucky.
Doesn't Kurt Angle come after him with an axe at one point?
Yeah, though that's hilarious. That was the best.
Yeah, I think here we're explaining why this company didn't capitalize on the opportunity they created for themselves here.
Absolutely. It's just one of a million reasons, man.
So the next match is the 6-team cuff match. It's the Murder City Machine Guns versus LAX versus Scott Steiner and Petey Williams versus the Rock and Rave Infection. Jimmy Rave and Lance Hoyt versus Eric Young and Kaz versus Black Rain and Relic. And holy shit, do most of these teams suck.
I can't even begin. Like, we could spend all day just breaking down the gimmicks of these people.
Black Rain, which is Dustin Rhodes playing a split personality, and Relic, which is Killer spelled backwards. I understand.
It is? Oh my God, I just got that.
I loved Petey Williams as little Petey Pump. Like,
it's genius.
He's in great shape, but he's, a small guy, and he's like doing the. He's got the Scott Steiner gear, so that was hilarious. I mean, LAX I always thought was a hot gimmick. Motor City Machine Guns were a good team. And Eric Young was crazy over here doing Super Eric.
Absolutely. In fact, the whole match is just based around Kaz and Super Eric, to the point where if they had just made this a tag team match between like LAX and Eric Young and Kaz, it would have made it so much easier than just including 95 people in the show.
12 guys in the ring. Do you have any idea how big the TNA ring is? Is it smaller than the WWE ring?
It is smaller, yes. I mean, it gets a little bit of extra space with the 6 sides, but no, it is a smaller ring.
Yeah, so think of a Royal Rumble when it's got 12 guys and how nobody can really move. And now it's a cage and you've got 12 guys. They're actually trying to have a match. So the way this works is you're eliminated when you get handcuffed to the cage. You win by not being handcuffed to the cage. And there's 11 pairs of handcuffs hanging from the cage. What nonsense is this?
It's pretty incredible. And the way people treat being handcuffed to the cage, first of all, since there are 12 people in the ring, there's only room for one spot to be happening at any given time. Everyone else is just
it's so dangerous to do anything. Like, you suplex somebody, you could easily take somebody's knees out. Like, once you get more than about 4 guys in the ring, it's not safe to take bumps.
And remember that because Kaz is on the top rope doing Spanish flies and shit into the middle of this mass of people. And yeah, that's just how it's going. And everybody's just sort of hanging onto the wall. We never see half the people get handcuffed. It's just like, hey, I guess Homicide's handcuffed now.
And then once they're handcuffed, it's like they're frozen. They can't do anything.
They literally, the best was I kept like returning my attention to the Motor City Machine Guns because they're like right center at hard camera. So they're just reacting to everything that everyone else is doing because they go out pretty early. So at one point when like Black Rain and Relic are like picking on Kaz, they're like, hey, you stop that. You're mean. Just like waving and like throwing kicks at him and stuff. But like not like they actually give a shit.
So this starts by going to the back and revealing that Eric Young has been beaten up by Relic and Black Rain. So he is not there to start the match. And then like Kaz comes down and doesn't want to get in the cage, even though he's a babyface, and the referees have to like force him to get in.
And then Kaz beats everyone's ass for like 10 minutes by himself.
Yeah. Scott Steiner, who is the #1 contender for the TNA World title, is the first man eliminated. He's handcuffed like a minute into the match.
I swear to you, he only moves like 6 steps for the entire match. He heads over to where he's going to get handcuffed, shuffles around, and then somebody handcuffs him.
Yeah, he was pretty much done at this point. And here we are 9 years later, and he's just returned to TNA.
Well, hey, it must be said that #1 contendership is going to lead us to that epic Scott Steiner math promo that all of us know and love.
The greatest of all time.
Yes. So at least that's ahead.
Everybody punches each other because there's no room to do anything else. Eric Young comes out and tries to get up the cage, but he's scared of Black Rain and Relic, so he gives up after like 30 seconds and just walks away.
Yeah, Eric Young's whole thing is that he's a fraidy cat. Like, they actually kind of geniusly build him that way. When it dates back way back to when they were basically firing all of Team Canada, and they start the Don't Fire Eric campaign that the crowd gets really into, and they actually don't fire Eric because it works. And then from then on, he creates this character who's afraid of his own pyro, and he's afraid of spiders and the dark and everything. And
Yeah.
they love it. The fans love it.
Oh, he's so over. We'll get to what happens in a second here, but it comes down to Black Rain and Relic against Hoyt and Rave. Like, the super, and Eric Young comes out in like his Superman outfit, Super Eric, and he climbs up the cage and jumps off onto everybody. And then he handcuffs everybody.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even see what happens.
Well, the one clever spot that they come up with for these handcuffs is that Relic and Black Rain have Eric down, and they're going to handcuff him. And instead, somehow, Eric Young grabs Relic's hand and makes him handcuff himself.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, a thing you can do by accident.
It's a superpower. Yeah.
So that was pretty clever. But yeah, and that's all this match was for, is for Super Eric to come out.
Yeah. Super Eric was fun. The rest of this match was incredibly dumb.
Yep.
Then we get an interview with Joe's family. No idea if these were actually his family members or not.
They actually are, yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And then next match, Awesome Kong and Raisha Saeed versus Gail Kim and OD. Raisha Saeed is cheerleader Melissa wrestling in a burqa.
What a fucking disgusting insult. Like, I don't... Look, I am a gigantic fan of women's wrestling. Always have been, always will be. I'm Shimmer through and through. Cheerleader Melissa is one of the most amazing women's wrestlers of the past 20 years. And the fact that she only ever got a fair shot in a major company by wearing a fucking burqa is a slap in the dick to everyone.
Despite the fact that she is in a burqa here and like can't really see or move, she's awesome in this match.
Yeah, the whole match is about her. I just don't get it.
Yeah, it's not a bad match because it's just like Gail Kim getting beat up the whole time, and she's such a great face in peril.
Yeah, it is so funny, though, to look at this match. Like, Gail Kim is great because she just wants to get to Kong, and she can't, and Saeed's taking advantage, and it's great. ODB is literally unchanged from this moment to current. Like, even more so than Scott Steiner. Like, she is exactly the same.
It's not a bad gimmick, but I can understand how it got stale after years and years.
Yeah, I mean, she just came back and had another run for the title where it's no different than it was. But she was super over at the time, and she does not do a bad job here. Yeah.
So, yeah, hot tag to ODB. Gail hits a super Frankensteiner, which is awesome, and gets a huge pop. And then missile drop kick gets the win for the face team. Good match.
Yeah, not much else to say about it. It was a good match. It was really good to see the women's division kind of represented nicely. Even though there's no title match on the show, like it still felt important.
Yeah. Next, we get an interview with Karen Angle. Like you said, she and Kurt are separated, but she says she's there to support him. And at this point, you're just like, please, God, don't let them have her get involved in this match. Just one time, spare us the Russo swerve.
Yeah, why are they even telegraphing that? Like, they make it's so obvious that they're like trying to make us think like, oh shit, Karen's gonna get involved in the match.
Yeah.
Like, why even like I think I remember the first time I saw this live being like, oh my God, I don't even want to ruin it. Yeah. This can't even be good now.
You just
Fuck
know
this.
it. Yeah. So next match is Booker T and Sharmell against Robert Roode and Peyton Banks. So the backstory, I guess, is that Roode doesn't like that Booker and other guys are coming in to take his spot, and Roode accidentally punched out Sharmell.
Yeah. They actually have already had like 3 matches before this one, like all involved in the same storyline. Like they had a Stand By Your Man strap match. They had like a no DQ match that ended in a DQ. And
was that where the loser got beat with a strap?
I think so, and Rude won that one.
That is so Southern.
Yes. And it's very Southern to have...
Jim Cornette had a clause in his contract that he got to book one match on each show. And that was it.
Yeah, and I remember there was a little bit of a stir at the time about, super misogynist, vaguely racist Robert Roode getting to beat Booker T with a strap on live television.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Questionable.
And then we're here. we're here because, as far as I can recall, Booker T had it in his contract that Sharmell could have a match. And they tried for so long to figure out how to make that happen. And this is what they came up with.
Like,
it's not a horrible solution.
In reality, he had a clause in his contract that Sharmell had to wrestle.
Oh, yes. That's what I think I recall hearing from the time. I could be mistaken about that.
So that she could get that big TNA pay-per-view payoff.
I guess. I think it was just that she had always wanted to, and like WWE would never let her. Sort of like how Brandy Rhodes is wrestling in TNA right now. It's just one of those things. It's just one of those things that helps like get like a Booker T or a Cody Rhodes in, is being like, hey, your wife can wrestle here if she wants to.
Yeah. So they start the match. Booker beats up Rude, but he doesn't bring... I mean, it's hard to bring the intensity you need to, because it's like, this guy punched your wife out. You should be trying to kill him. And
right.
He doesn't have a knife or a gun, so it's not quite at the level it should be. Rude a really long time because Booker can't or won't tag in Sharmell. Booker kind of fires up, hits the spine buster, goes for the bookend. Rude blocks it. Sharmell tags in. She hits a really weak slap. Rude like holds her forever so that Banks can slap her, but she misses and slaps Rude, and Sharmell rolls up Banks, who I guess they'd all tagged in at some point.
I guess. I mean,
yeah.
I didn't... As stupid of an angle as this is, and oh my god, is it stupid. And as stupid as a match concept, like, this wasn't horrible. It didn't have the hate that you really needed for a Southern-style thing like this. Sharmell did just fine in her role, as limited though it was. And poor Peyton Royce, who was Rain on the independent scene, unbelievably talented performer, never have to do a goddamn thing in TNA except be backup Tracy Brooks, which is a horrible way to live.
I'm sensing a pattern here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, that's just how it went. And then at the end of the match, Rude just berates Peyton Royce and just leaves her in the ring. Exactly.
He's going to punch her, but he doesn't. So
yes,
good.
Yes, Bobby Roode, woman puncher, is thankfully a concept that they drop after this.
Somehow the glorious gimmick is better than Beater.
Though you can kind of see the elements that will eventually lead to the good Bobby Roode here. Like, he's still a very good worker, and he's really building a personality for himself. It's still going to take another 5 years.
Yeah. Next up, we get an interview with Martin Joe for the fight. Just kind of straightforward promo talking about how hard Joe worked. Like this, I'm intrigued by the idea of wrestlers having trainers for their matches. I think that's something that adds legitimacy, and again, just into the presentation here.
Yeah. And I actually just remembered the other time that I've seen a presentation like this, and it wasn't exactly like this because it didn't involve the trainers and everything. And this is a random match that almost no one remembers. But do you remember John Cena versus Bobby Lashley at Great American Bash?
That is a similar build where they were doing sit down interviews with Steve Austin, commenting on who they thought was going to win the match. So that was cool.
Yeah, they literally get all the greatest champions of the era and say who do you think's going to win, and they picked it different ways. And by the time you get to that match, which is between John Cena and essentially a nobody, you've created something that's a big deal that they obviously intended to go back to later, but Lashley left. Yeah. That's awesome. I've never seen it fail. So why don't they do it more?
No, that's the one thing I'd come up with is the WrestleMania 12 didn't really do great business, and that had a very pure sport build, but nothing they were doing at that point did good business, so I wouldn't have held that against Sean and Brett.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. But this is, again, from top to bottom, every presentation decision they make, aside from involving Karen, is dead on. This is the best TNA ever did like that.
I hate to be the guy who's the guy I don't like must have not been involved in this, but doesn't it feel like Vince Russo wasn't involved in this?
I think that you're probably right, though he was writing all of the scripts at the time, so he had a hand in it, even if it's not a visible one.
Yeah, maybe it just feels like Dutch Mantel put it together.
Well, it's also worth mentioning, too, that Jeff Jarrett was gigantically into MMA at this point. Later he's going to come back and do an MMA gimmick. So this also might be partially him.
Yeah. So next up is the Lethal Lockdown match. It's Team Cage versus Team Tomko. Team Cage is Christian Cage, Kevin Nash, Rhino, Sting, and Matt Morgan. Team Tomko is Tomko, AJ Styles, Team 3D, and James Storm. Lethal Lockdown is too many gimmicks for my taste.
Agreed. This is the only thing that every Lockdown show has in common, is they always do a Lethal Lockdown. They've done, I want to say, probably at least 10 or 11 Lethal Lockdown matches. This is the only watchable one.
Yeah. So Lethal Lockdown is War Games, but same rules as War Games, where two guys start, and then there's the random coins win. Then somebody enters every 2 minutes. They alternate. The match, the roof lowers from the ceiling. The roof has a bunch of weapons on it, and then you win with a pinfall or a submission. I do think allowing pinfalls kind of improves on the War Games, because I think you add more drama to a match when you have a pinfall, a
Agreed.
1, 2, 3 for the win. I think maybe the other thing you could do is make it elimination, but to let the pinfalls count like during the entrant period, or the match would just go on for a really long time.
Yeah. And I mean, is this the first Lethal Lockdown match that you've seen?
But this might be the only one.
Yeah, okay. So what you kind of notice as we get towards the end of the match, and we'll go through all the steps, but by the time they get to the end, there are so many people and so much garbage and shit in the ring that doing an elimination style would be impossible, because how the fuck are you supposed to do like 10 different spots?
Well, don't they have a cage match with a roof on it?
Yeah.
They always go up on the roof, right?
I mean, this is, I think, maybe the last time that they actually do that, because this is definitely the biggest time that they did. This is maybe the scariest spot I've ever seen in my life.
It's up there. We'll get there. So my first question was, Tomko was the heel here? They did like the reverse Batista turning on Triple H?
What basically happened was when they first came to when he first came to TNA, Christian obviously had Tomko brought in, and he got AJ with him, and they had a stable called the Christian Coalition. And then at some point, Kurt Angle like paid him a bunch of money, and so Tomko and AJ defected and became members of the Angle Alliance. And then so Kurt and Christian like feuded all through 2007. And then by this point, it's just Tomko by himself feuding with Christian, and like AJ and he are tag team champions together. So really, it's just kind of a long building thing between AJ, Tomko, and Christian on the other side. So Tomko and AJ are still the heels.
Okay. So I loved the way they started this match. Christian comes out first because he's, the captain, and he's going to lead by example. Tomko comes out, but when the lights come up, they reveal that AJ Styles is on top of the cage, and he jumps off onto Christian. It turns out Styles is actually starting the match. Which
is genius, because they have the same entrance music even. So they played AJ's music, but Tomko teased. Oh my god, it was great.
Yeah, and from there it's just sort of typical War Games stuff where the faces get the advantage when the numbers are even, but then another heel comes in and the heels take the advantage. Tomko's team, of course, won the coin toss. Bubba comes in. He gets like the most heat of the night because he's wearing a Yankees jersey in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
You there?
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Rhino comes in for the save. Then James Storm is in next. AJ climbs up the cage and Christian follows him. They fight on top of the cage and Christian falls out to the floor, which is a big bump, but the camera basically misses it.
Yeah.
So this was kind of clever because this is as Kevin Nash is entering for Christian's team, but the heels are still at the advantage because Christian is out of the match for the moment. And like we said, Kevin Nash could not give less of a fuck here.
Oh, yeah. You've seen half-speed Kevin Nash. This is like 1/50th speed Kevin Nash. Like he's like, I'm gonna take 10 steps. However you want me to take them, that's up to you.
I think he gets through this match for that.
Yeah, every bump he takes, it just results in him leaning against a turnbuckle. So it's not really a bump.
Christian is somehow back up and in the match already after like 2 minutes, which feels like way too soon.
Right.
Devon's in next. Matt Morgan is out next. This is his TNA debut. Matt Morgan is one of those I can't believe WWE let him get away stories, because I just can't believe Vince didn't fall in love with him.
It's actually interesting because the book on him when he was in OVW was that he was the giant who could actually talk.
Yeah.
And so they bring him in with the stuttering gimmick and ruin that whole thing and kind of shit all over him. But I think they just had sort of like, they just had too many giants at the time where he came in. Like, he was a member of that Survivor Series team that Brock Lesnar had that had literally 5 giants on it.
Yeah, Big Show, A-Train, Lesnar, Nathan Jones, and Matt Morgan, right?
So, like, Matt Morgan was the greenest of all of them, including Nathan Jones, if you can believe that. So he just wound up, like, slipping through their fingers. If they got a hold of him now, oh, my God.
Yeah, what's he up to these days?
He just re-debuted in TNA.
Oh, my God. Yeah. So Tomko is the final entrant for his team, and then Sting is the final entrant. And then like 2 minutes go by before the ceiling finally comes down.
Yeah.
But
they majorly pop for Sting too. Like they're chanting, "We want Sting," loud.
There's tons of weapons hanging from the cage. Every conceivable weapon, as either West or Tenay says. Christian and Store cage. I don't know what the point of a cage with a roof on it is if there's trap doors in the roof, but they go up on top of the cage and fight. This is where things get insane. Christian sets up a table. Styles knocks him out, puts him on the table, and sets up a ladder out of the cage. So this cage is probably 15 feet high, and then you have like an 8 to 10 foot ladder. So they're 25 feet in the air when they both climb up this thing and start fighting on it.
And there's so many other elements that make this incredibly dangerous too. Like when Storm and Christian are fighting, at one point Christian takes a step and his foot goes through the cage. Yeah. Like that's how shoddy the cage is.
Non-reinforced roof.
Yes. Then they go and put the ladder up, but there's not enough space for them to put it the way that like Jeff Hardy always does it, so that he's on the other side of the ladder facing the guy he's going to jump on, because that gives you more stability. They have to put it the other way, the way where you have to turn your body so that you can easily just kick the ladder out from under yourself and fuck it up while you're jumping. And they have Storm half-assedly hold it, but literally AJ Styles is, I want to say, 2 feet from killing himself. Like that's what we're dealing with. From falling from like 25 feet in the air headfirst into the crowd.
So I'm thinking about how you would set this up. The chain links on top of the cage probably are not big enough for you to like put the legs of the ladder into be stable. So it's just like sitting on tiny little cage links. This was so stupid.
Yes, it's incredibly dangerous.
Nobody died.
And there was a moment, like literally, I will never forget this moment because it's like blinded into my memory, where like the ladder kind of like shakes, like it's going off of the side of the thing, and like Storm catches it, and like, but like for that split second, like my heart stopped. Like it's that dangerous. Like this easily could have been that kind of incident.
Yeah.
And then AJ kind of lazily flops onto the table because he's trying not to die.
Yeah. Pushes the ladder over. I don't know why he tried to kill his teammate. I mean, he took out Christian too, but I don't know like what the point of that is.
Got me.
Yeah. And of course, that's not the finish.
No.
So back in the cage, Storm gets a beer bottle and smashes it on Morgan's head, which blood we saw on this night, which is really strange for a show of all cage matches. Yep. Rhino hits the gore on Storm and pins him. Why do you think they had Rhino get the pin here?
That's a really great question because they're not doing anything with Rhino at this point. I think it's just he had a spot that he could easily do in that moment, and it's fine. I don't friggin' know, man. Like, they make a lot of decisions here that don't make a ton of sense. And especially when it comes to Rhino, they always seem to be trying to give him pushes on nights like this, and it never goes anywhere. Like, he was the leader of the front line, and he won the title at Bound for Glory 2005, and he gets this pin here. It never goes anywhere.
Is there any question that if he weren't with WWE, they would be bringing him back?
Oh, there's no question whatsoever. I mean, he's probably the only one who can still work who they are bringing back.
This was actually, for all our joking and the terrifyingness of that ladder spot, I thought this was actually a good match.
Yeah, this, like I said, this is the only good Lethal Lockdown match. You have people in it who can actually work and who know the limitations of the match that they're trying to do. Sting and Christian are super duper over, and the crowd cares about what they do. AJ is unbelievably entertaining. And like the moment, like when you said that there were little trap doors in the cage, like basically what it is you have to climb up the side of the cage from the inside, and then you have to swing into like a little, like just a little person-sized hole in the cage that you have to swing sideways into. And AJ climbs through that thing like, seriously, it's like walking into the next room. Like, it's unbelievable how athletic he is.
Ooh, so main event time. We get
Yes.
the video package for Angle Joe. Great package. All their history, Angle's debut, their initial matches, and then it goes into how they trained for the match. And I'll just say, isn't it kind of revolutionary, the idea that a professional wrestler would train for a big title fight? Because that's the kind of thing WWE never mentions. Like, they talk about how Shane McMahon trains in MMA, and it's just like, well, what does everybody else do all day?
Not only do they not go into that, they genuinely go out of their way to make it seem like wrestlers just kind of show up. You know what I mean? Like, they make a point on every show of being like, oh, hey, The Rock just arrived an hour and a half into the show in his street clothes.
Yeah.
Like, I guess he gives a shit about his title match.
Just, yeah, it's one of those Vince McMahon being like, no, this isn't sports, this is sports entertainment, damn it. You know, nobody wants to know that these guys actually learn how to fight. They're like superheroes. They just know how to fight.
Right. Like, could you imagine them trying to do this with, like, Dean Ambrose? Like, no. Dean Ambrose doesn't give a shit.
No, that's literally his gimmick.
Yeah. But, yeah, this is amazing. They go so far out of their way. And my favorite thing about this is Kurt Angle looks radically different, even from the pay-per-view before this one. Like, not only is he in much better shape just in the 1 month, but like he's coming out in like MMA shorts. He's got his feet taped and no shoes on. Like, he is going the extra mile.
He wore gloves or he had his fists taped up. I can't remember which.
Yeah, I can't remember which either.
But yeah, he looks like a totally different person. He's also probably dropped 10 to 15 pounds from his normal weight.
Yeah, and they do the thing where they have the security people like escort them to the ring, and oh my god, like, I
love the long walk from the back where they have the steady cam as they're walking towards the ring, and when WWE would do this, their bass beat going, it's like dun 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 dun. Yeah, this is my favorite entrance when they do this.
Yeah,
they do a tail of the tape, which is another touch I love. Just of accomplishments, but Joe is way heavier, he's taller, he's got the longer reach, and then Frank Trigg joins as we've talked about. His commentary is tremendous. More frills for the entrance. They do a video package for both guys highlighting their accomplishments and everything they've done. Very kind of UFC style video package. Out with like torches, and they do kind of like the Samoan war dance. This was sort of the one thing I could have lived without.
Well, they actually tried to make this to be like the thing that Joe did for all of his big matches in TNA. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, this was like the official, like, this is what Joe brings to the big shit. Like when Triple H does his special entrances, or when Taker has all the good shit. Like, this was the thing that Joe brings when it's like really on.
Yeah. So We get kind of the boxing style introductions in the ring. It's done by Jeremy Borash because they can't afford Michael Buffer, but he even announces the referee sport touch. How in a boxing match they always announce the referees and the judges and the doctor and the commission officials. And then before the match, Angle demands that Karen Angle be ejected from ringside. Who cares about this?
No, yeah. Like, I was relieved that they did this because it means she wouldn't be part of it. But it's like, why waste the time? Just don't involve her.
Yeah. Thankfully, she is out of it and does not reappear. Bullet dodged on that one.
Right.
So finally, match starts. They square off. They feel each other out with leg kicks. Crowd is rocking. Joe picks Angle's ankle, but he gets the rope out that Angle will be able to escape leg holds because he doesn't have boots on. It'll be easier for him to slide his feet out, which is kind of a cool take. My only issue with Angle not wearing shoes is you would think Joe would just stomp on his feet all the time.
Right, but it's not pro wrestling. It's a real fight, man.
They do a good job of not portraying this. Like, they make this seem real without shitting on everything else that happened this night. There's no everything else you saw was fake, but this is real. There's none of that, which is good.
This actually, and I'm glad we talked about Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit on a past podcast, because this really inherits a lot of the credibility from those matches, right? Kurt Angle clearly understood what worked about those matches. It's not real, but it looks competitive. Just the trading of the holds, and they're pro wrestling holds. They're not real holds, but that's what people believe is in these particular pro wrestling holds. So that's what they do here. It's they kind of blend MMA into this sort of Chris Benoit Kurt Angle match and just put Joe in it, and it works.
Yeah. They trade takedowns. Joe stomps on Angle's bare feet, which, there we go. I was hoping for that at some point. Angle hits a suplex, which feels like a huge high spot for this match.
Right.
Which, this is one of my favorite things about this, is the strikes are stiff, but I feel like this is an easier match to work because you're not taking a bunch of back bumps. You're not getting suplexed a bunch. A basic suplex is a huge spot in this match.
It is interesting that you say that, because when we get to the finish, I'll say, but Kurt Angle got hurt bad in this match, which is so interesting that this is the match he got hurt in.
Angle gets a choke. Joe makes the ropes. Big belly-to-belly suplex from Angle. They go to the mat. Joe goes for an armbar, or Angle goes for the armbar. Joe blocks it, rolls Angle into a pin. Angle applies an arm lock. Angle locks on the figure four, but Joe turns it over. A huge clothesline from Joe, and Angle does a flip off of it.
Amazing.
Yeah, great sell. Joe boots Angle after Angle goes up to the top rope. Buster locks on the ankle lock. Amazing counter there.
Yes. And I mean, Kurt, this is the best Kurt I've ever seen when it comes to counters and doing stuff like that. He's just smoothly floating into the ankle lock again and again and again. It's beautiful
stuff. Do you remember the match he had against The Undertaker at that No Way Out?
Yes.
Crawled down his body during the tombstone to put him in the ankle lock.
I mean, that's just genius stuff. More wrestlers should really be how can I get into my finisher from literally anywhere? That's how you make money.
That made DDP's career.
Yep. Orton's too.
Joe gets out. He slams Angle. Huge power bomb into a Boston Crab, then a Lion Tamer, then an STF, then the crossface. Joe gets out of the crossface into the ankle lock. Joe reverses back into the crossface. The crowd is going wild for this. Angle slips out. Joe blocks the clothesline, takes him down into another crossface. Angle somehow gets out of that, rolls into an Olympic slam, which is that he does that to a guy that size this far into the match from that position. Joe kicks out. Another ankle lock. Joe rolls it into a choke. Angle grabs the referee's shirt and pulls on him to get to the ropes. And I said I'd never seen that before, but Neville just did it at the pay-per-view this weekend.
Yeah, he did.
Where are we? Angle goes for the Olympic Slam again. Joe slips out, grabs Angle, like now it's serious business, slams him into the cage. Huge super kick, huge muscle buster. 1, 2, 3. Joe wins the title.
And the funny thing about this match is that you can tell as you just went through the description of it. In the beginning, it's like so MMA, right? Yeah. By the end, it's very pro wrestling, but it felt like a natural transition from one to the other. It never feels like something's out of control, never feels like it's sports entertainment to any degree. Like it's just pure all the way to the end. And that probably the most nastiest muscle buster he ever hit in TNA.
Oh, he hit him so hard.
Yeah, and actually that wind up, like, that knocked Angle completely out and, like, gave him a concussion and fucked his neck all up.
Yeah, that was, I mean, watching it, you can tell it's got some stank on it.
Yeah, but oh my God, it was beautiful. And, like, the crowd, when Joe wins, the crowd explodes. That's the biggest pop I've ever heard in TNA. We've never gotten one close.
It's been years of building to him getting the belt. He should have gotten it long before this. You know, they have this amazing match. He wins. There's no bullshit. He just beat Kurt Angle. He beat the man, one of the biggest stars in the world. And it's like TNA's guy beat the WWE guy, which is something they should have done when they first brought Angle in. They should have had Joe beat him to establish that TNA is better than WWE, but they didn't do it back then.
Yeah. And I want to give full credit to Kurt Angle for this, because the degree to which he committed to this match and committed to putting Samoa Joe over clean is like above and beyond what anybody at his level would ever have to do. Like, he committed himself fully to saying basically, this is the best version of me there will ever be, and Samoa Joe still beat me clean. And that's an unbelievable endorsement.
Couldn't have put him over stronger.
No, he really couldn't. Like, after this, you would think that this is a company that is ready to compete with WWE. It is that level of a success. Joe's holding that belt. It's emotional. People in the crowd are crying. People are freaking out. It's amazing.
It's so bizarre that this is like, this feels like it should be a turning point in wrestling history. Like, this match should have like wrestling, like a newer, credible, different way of doing things, new presentation, different work in the ring. I mean, it's not brand new because, well, you've had, Japanese wrestling has often mixed martial arts. Antonio Inoki did a bunch of this. What was the promotion in Japan that would do like worked shoot fights, basically?
You're talking about like battle arts?
Yeah.
Or UFI, or they did a couple of
times. That's what I'm thinking of. And also, in a lot of ways, if you go back and watch like an old match, it's kind of like this. It's just they're doing amateur wrestling stuff on the mat instead of MMA. But this could be a new style of pro wrestling where they start with like MMA stuff and then they build up to the high spots to make the high spots seem bigger than they were. And instead, it's something that happened one time and was never repeated again.
Yeah, if nothing else, this should have just been how they did all of Samoa Joe's title defenses. Maybe even if not like the worked MMA kind of thing, like this presentation, Jeremy Borash doing this style introduction, like, why not make this something that follows Joe around? Like, the credibility that he gets in this is off the charts incredible. He can replicate this. His next title defense is a triple threat with Scott Steiner and Kaz.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Oh, God. So because Scott Steiner's a champion amateur wrestler and they can play that up. And I mean, Scott Steiner's not real mobile at this point in his career, but he could do some amateur wrestling stuff on the mat. And that would be kind of cool to see those styles clash. But instead, They never go back to this. Instead, it's Vince Russo bullshit from here.
You're absolutely right.
And Samoa Joe gets kidnapped by ninjas at some point.
Yeah, that's later on, but that definitely does happen. He decides he's going to start slitting people's throats at a certain point. He gets managed by Taz at a certain point. 6 months after this, at Bound for Glory, he is going to lose clean to Sting in the middle of the ring, and the birth of the main event mafia is going to spell the doom of TNA.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. In the 6 months, yeah.
The same story as it feels like every wrestling promotion that failed. They kept putting over the old guys instead of the new guys.
Yep. If you want to point to one moment that spelled the end of TNA, you don't have to go any further than October of 2008. And here we are 9 years later, and they're still pretending like it's alive.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, a really interesting show just because it feels like it was their opportunity and they completely whiffed on it. We don't really know why, and I would love to hear somebody tell. It just doesn't make any sense to me that when that buy rate came in, even without the buy rate, just based on the live crowd reaction, it feels like they should have been like, we've got lightning in a bottle here.
Yeah, and they knew. You can tell that they knew. They just didn't know what to do with it, and they dropped it. And someday, I swear to you, I'm going to write a book about TNA, just about what it was like to be a fan throughout this entire era of TNA, and the highs and the lows and the hope and the disappointment and ultimately the tragedy of it all. And it's a trip I've never been on with any other fandom that I've ever had. Like, TNA is special in that regard.
Yeah. And it's kind of why I'm glad I never got too involved, because it just would have broken my heart.
Yeah, but I mean,
I
after watching this show,
times, and it was never worth my time.
Yeah, after watching this show, though, I bet you can see why I was addicted. Like, it's the highs are so high, man. They're so high.
Well, so here's what I remember is, and after this, they did an Angle Joe rematch on TV, which was insane, and they just had a normal professional wrestling match.
That's correct.
No elements of this.
No, they never refer to this ever again.
No,
like, I don't think
this was the best night in company history.
That's correct. I honestly don't believe that they ever even bring it up.
I can't. The only thing I can explain it as is I've heard Vince Russo talk about professional wrestling, and his philosophy is wrestling matches don't draw money. No one will ever tune in to see professional wrestling. They tune in to see characters. They tune in to see storylines. No one cares about fake fighting. It's really hard to admit that you're wrong. And I think to acknowledge that this had worked would have meant he would have had to admit he was wrong about it. And hard thing to do as a grown man, especially.
Honestly, up and down this show, I think if you look at it, you can see the push and pull that existed throughout the entirety of TNA between like Jeff Jarrett and Vince Russo and their different ideologies about what professional wrestling is supposed to be. Because on this show, you have great wrestling that's interesting, that's fabulous, it's well presented, right next to weird-ass nonsense shit that makes no sense and doesn't deserve to exist. I'm not saying all of it's Jeff and all of it's Russo and all of it's D'Amore and all of it's Mantell. I'm just saying that there is a fundamental separation within the heart of TNA that never got reconciled.
No, and it doesn't make any sense because it's just at some point you have to choose. Like in the late 90s, Vince had to choose between the Jim Ross, Jim Cornette vision and the Russo Crash TV vision, and he made the right choice to go with Russo. And at this point, they needed to choose which way they were going to go, and they made the wrong choice.
Yeah. Clearly, in retrospect, going the legit sport route was the right choice. They didn't make it.
Because they need to be an alternative to WWE, and they never were able to do that. Instead of building around the X Division, tag teams, women, serious, credible professional wrestling, while WWE was doing sports entertainment, WWE light. And now today, when I try to come up with like what would be a good alternative brand for TNA, I don't really know because now WWE is doing all of those things.
Yeah. Like, honestly, in order to be contrary to WWE, you'd have to go the other way and be sports entertainment, and nobody wants that. So there's nothing left for them to be. Yeah.
Yeah. So unfortunately, any final thoughts on Lockdown? Really good show. I'd say strongly recommend you at least go watch the main event if you've never seen it. I rented this show for $1 on YouTube. Definitely worth my $1, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're going to get some Schadenfreude nonsense. You're going to get to see some faces that you had forgotten existed. You're going to be really surprised when Shark Boy comes out with a vest saying "Shell yeah." You're going to enjoy yourself watching this show. And that was the thing about TNA. It was always a fun ride. Even though it was aggravating, made me insane, made me rip my hair out. All these years later, I look back, and every single match on the show made me remember fondly how much I loved it. So
I'm sure it was never boring.
No, it never was. So this is a window into the insanity that was my life for 10 years. So please go and enjoy it.
All right, so that does it for Lockdown 2008. And next week, we're going to do something a little differently. We're going to turn the show over because we are in springtime. We are going to let the listeners choose Spring Stampede show we should review. So the choices are Spring Stampede 1994, which is an awesome show, one of WCW gems. Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship is the main event, and a really good undercard. Steve Austin versus the Great Muta, Cactus Jack, and Max Payne against the Nasty Boys in one of the stiffest matches you will ever see. A really strong card from top to bottom. Spring Stampede 1997, right from the boom period of WCW, main event. Randy Savage versus Diamond Dallas Page, no disqualification match. Really awesome main event and an interesting show from top to bottom there. Next, 1999, the last WCW pay-per-view, probably the last good one too. Main event, fatal four-way match, Ric Flair versus Hollywood Hogan versus Sting versus Diamond Dallas Page. For the WCW Championship, Randy Savage is the guest referee. And on the undercard, Goldberg versus Kevin Nash in a rematch of Starrcade 1998. And the final choice, Spring Stampede 2000, Jeff Jarrett versus Diamond Dallas Page for the vacant WCW Championship. This is 5 days after they've done the WCW reboot, where they stripped every one of their titles, forgot about all the storylines, and completely restarted the company. And it is one of the most insane pay-per-views you will ever see. If you like nonsense Vince Russo booking, this is the show for you.
I really want to believe in my heart that you guys are going to pick one of the pay-per-views that actually has good matches on it because you love us and you want good things for us.
We all know what's going to happen here.
I'm afraid, man. I'm afraid.
And I'll say there were Twitter only allows 4 choices, but if you want to 98, which has Sting versus Randy Savage and DDP versus Raven. Go on Twitter and just tweet at Cewsh and write in a vote for 1998. But yeah, those are your 4 choices. Spring Stampede 94, Spring Stampede 97, Spring Stampede 99, Spring Stampede 2000. You can go to Cewsh Reviews on Twitter to vote. The poll will be up all weekend.
There you got it. And we can't wait to do one for you. I have not seen 3 of those 4 shows. So, of course, it would be the horrible one that I've seen.
Naturally. All right. That'll do it for this week. You got anything to plug?
Nope. On the blog, we're still doing the scouting reports. We're about to get out the one that has to do with the authors of Pain, who I give one of my highest grades to. So that's a little bit teaser for that. But mostly I'm just working on that. And I guess we're adding more and more podcasts by the day, I guess. We're actually talking about doing yet another podcast. I don't know if my life can sustain 3, but fuck, man, I don't know. We're doing lots of these.
Ooh, good tease. I didn't know about that. We're doing it live here.
That's right. It's very, very beginning stages, but it's just something to keep under your hat. Just keep an eye out.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to hearing more about that. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.